Table salt. Table salt is the most processed form of salt in existence and the most consumed worldwide. It begins as either rock salt mined from underground deposits or brine pumped from underground salt formations, then undergoes industrial purification to remove virtually all minerals other than sodium chloride, typically reaching a purity of 99.9% or higher. The resulting crystals are then mechanically ground to a uniform fine grain, dried and treated with anti-caking agents, most commonly sodium aluminosilicate or calcium silicate, to prevent the crystals from absorbing moisture and clumping in humid conditions. Iodized table salt, which became standard across much of the world through the early 20th century, contains a small addition of potassium iodide or potassium iodate, typically around 45 micrograms per gram. Iodine deficiency, which causes goiter and severe developmental disorders, including cretinism, was endemic across inland regions far from the sea where dietary iodine from fish and seaweed was unavailable. The introduction of iodized salt in the United States beginning in 1924 is considered one of the most cost-effective public health interventions in history, virtually eliminating iodine deficiency disorders across the country within a generation. The fine, uniform grain of table salt dissolves quickly and measures predictably, which is why it remains the standard in baking, where consistent, quantifiable seasoning is more important than complexity or texture. Kosher salt. Kosher salt is not salt that has been blessed by a rabbi. The name refers to its function in the koshering process, the drawing out of blood from meat in accordance with Jewish dietary law, for which a coarse, flaky crystal with a large surface area is far more effective than fine table salt. The large flakes adhere to the surface of raw meat, draw moisture out through osmosis, and can be brushed away cleanly after the prescribed waiting period, taking the extracted blood with them. Fine-grained salt would simply dissolve into the meat surface and cannot be removed.
In practice, kosher salt has become the preferred cooking salt of professional kitchens across North America, largely independent of any religious context, for reasons that are entirely practical. The coarse, irregular flakes are easy to pick up and control between the fingers, making pinching and broadcasting salt by hand far more tactile and precise than using fine-grained salt. The lower density relative to table salt, a given volume of kosher salt contains significantly less sodium by weight, means it is more forgiving when added generously by hand. And the absence of anti-caking agents means it dissolves cleanly without leaving any metallic or chemical aftertaste. The two dominant American brands, Diamond Crystal and Morton Kosher Salt, have meaningfully different crystal structures. Diamond Crystal is lighter and flakier, Morton is denser and more compressed, and they are not interchangeable by volume in recipes, a source of persistent confusion and occasional culinary failure. Sea salt. Sea salt is produced by the evaporation of seawater, either through solar evaporation in shallow coastal pans or through mechanical evaporation using industrial equipment. The basic product is sodium chloride, as with all salt, but unrefined sea salt retains varying quantities of other minerals, magnesium, calcium, potassium, sulfates that were present in the original seawater. These trace minerals affect both flavor and texture, and their specific profile varies depending on the geography and water chemistry of the source. The claim that sea salt is inherently healthier or more mineral-rich than table salt is largely unsupported by nutritional evidence. The mineral quantities in unrefined sea salt are real, but too small to contribute meaningfully to dietary mineral intake. What sea salt offers is textural and sensory variety, coarser crystals that provide bursts of salinity rather than uniform distribution, a visual presence on food that fine-grained salt lacks, and in some cases, a subtle flavor complexity from the retained minerals. The actual sodium content per gram is essentially identical to table salt, which matters for anyone monitoring sodium intake and mistakenly reaching for sea salt under the impression that it is lower in sodium. Fleur de sel. Fleur de sel, flour of salt, is the most celebrated sea salt in the world and one of the most expensive. And its existence depends entirely on specific meteorological conditions that cannot be reliably engineered. It forms on the surface of shallow salt evaporation ponds on warm, dry, slightly windy days when a thin crust of delicate crystals nucleates at the water surface rather than sinking to the bottom. Salt farmers, palutiers, skim this crust by hand using flat wooden rakes, working quickly before wind or rain disrupts the surface. A single palutier working a single pond might collect only a kilogram of fleur de sel on a good day. On a bad day, nothing forms at all.
The finest Fleur de sel comes from Guernsey in Brittany, where the geology of the salt marshes, clay-lined ponds fed by Atlantic seawater filtered through layers of peat, and the specific local climate have produced a salt culture that has operated essentially unchanged since the 9th century. Guerin Fleur de sel has a naturally occurring gray tint from the clay of the pond floor, a high moisture content that keeps the flakes slightly damp and cohesive, and a faint mineral complexity that some describe as oceanic and others describe as subtly sweet. It is used exclusively as a finishing salt, added to food at the moment of serving, never during cooking, because its delicate crystal structure, irregular shape, and nuanced flavor are all destroyed by heat and dissolved by moisture. It is one of the few ingredients in cooking that is valued specifically for what happens to it in the mouth rather than in the pan.
Himalayan pink salt. Himalayan pink salt comes from the Kaira salt mine in Punjab, Pakistan, not from the Himalayas, which are several hundred kilometers away, but from a geological formation called the Salt Range that was deposited when a shallow inland sea evaporated approximately 600 million years ago, long before the Himalayan mountains existed. The pink color comes from trace quantities of iron oxide, rust, along with smaller amounts of other minerals, including calcium, potassium, and magnesium. The specific mineral profile varies between deposits and even between different sections of the same mine. The health claims surrounding Himalayan pink salt, that it contains 84 trace minerals, that it is more alkaline than other salts, that it improves respiratory function and balances the body's pH, are not supported by scientific evidence. The trace mineral content is real, but nutritionally insignificant. Sodium chloride is chemically neutral in water, not alkaline. And the respiratory claims, promoted alongside Himalayan salt lamps and salt caves, have no credible clinical basis. What Himalayan pink salt offers is visual appeal. The distinctive blush color makes it instantly recognizable on food, and a coarse, crunchy texture in its larger crystal forms that is genuinely pleasant as a finishing salt. Its global commercial success, which transformed it from a local Pakistani mining product into one of the most recognized salt brands in the world over roughly 2 decades, is primarily a marketing achievement.
Black salt, Kala Namak. Kala Namak is a volcanic rock salt produced primarily in India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh, and it is one of the most chemically unusual edible salts in existence. Raw halite from salt deposits in the region is combined with charcoal, seeds, bark, and other plant material and fired at extremely high temperatures in a sealed clay pot for 24 hours or more. The heat and reducing conditions convert sulfate compounds naturally present in the salt into hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide gas, along with various iron sulfide compounds. When the salt cools and recrystallizes, it retains these sulfur compounds in its crystal structure. The result is a salt that smells and tastes powerfully of hard-boiled eggs, the characteristic sulfurous quality that makes it immediately recognizable and deeply polarizing. Kala Namak is used extensively in Indian chat cuisine, where its pungent, umami-forward, faintly eggy quality adds a complexity that ordinary salt cannot replicate. It is also used in Ayurvedic medicine, where it has been prescribed for digestive complaints for centuries. And it has found a significant second life in vegan cooking as a flavoring agent that can make tofu scrambles, chickpea dishes, and plant-based foods convincingly evoke the sensory qualities of egg. The color ranges from pinkish gray to deep purple-black in large crystal form, lightening to a pale rose powder when ground fine.
Hawaiian black salt, black lava salt. Hawaiian black lava salt is sea salt blended with activated charcoal, typically derived from coconut shells, which coats the salt crystals in a fine layer of carbon that gives them their matte black appearance. It originated in Hawaii, where volcanic geology and strong Pacific evaporation conditions produce naturally mineral-rich sea salt, and the activated charcoal addition was developed as both a visual distinction and a flavor modifier. Activated charcoal has an extremely high surface area at the molecular level. A single gram can have a surface area of up to 3,000 square meters, and it adsorbs certain aromatic compounds, giving black lava salt a slightly earthy, mineral, muted quality that reduces the sharp initial salinity of raw sea salt. The activated charcoal in the salt has no meaningful detoxifying effect when consumed in these quantities, despite claims sometimes made in its marketing. The dose is far too small to have any systemic effect. What it does have is a visual impact on food.
The jet black crystals against the surface of grilled fish, sashimi, chocolate desserts, or sliced avocado create a stark, high contrast presentation that has made it a favorite finishing salt among chefs who think about the visual dimension of plating as seriously as the sensory one.
Hawaiian red salt, Alea salt. Hawaiian red Alea salt is a sea salt mixed with a volcanic red clay called Alea, which contains iron oxide and gives the salt its distinctive brick red to terracotta color. It is one of the few traditional salts in the world with a genuinely ancient cultural origin that has not been significantly disrupted by modern production. Native Hawaiians have used Alea salt in ceremonies, medicine, and food preservation for centuries, and it remains the traditional salt used in preparing Hawaiian dishes, including kalua pig and poke.
The iron oxide in the clay adds a subtle, slightly mineral, earthy quality to the salt's flavor, less sharp than plain sea salt, with a very faint metallic undertone that functions as an additional flavor dimension rather than a distraction. The clay also buffers the salt slightly, moderating the intensity of the sodium hit on the palate. In traditional Hawaiian cooking, alea salt is more than a seasoning. It is considered to carry spiritual significance, used to bless tools, canoes, and temples, and its presence in food is as much cultural as culinary. Commercial versions sold globally today use clay from the island of Kauai and sea salt evaporated from Hawaiian coastal waters, though the degree of traditional production methodology varies significantly between producers.
Smoked salt. Smoked salt is exactly what it describes. Salt that has been cold smoked over wood for an extended period, typically between 48 and 72 hours, during which the porous crystal surfaces of coarse sea salt or flaky finishing salt absorb volatile aromatic compounds from the smoke. The wood used determines the flavor profile entirely. Alder produces a light, sweet smoke with a subtle fruitiness. Hickory produces a strong, robust, bacon-like depth. Cherry wood adds a faint sweetness. Mesquite produces a sharp, intense, resinous quality. The salt itself changes flavor without changing its chemical composition. Sodium chloride remains sodium chloride. Aromatic coating fundamentally alters the sensory experience of using it. Smoked salt functions as a seasoning and as a flavor carrier simultaneously. Added to a dish at the end of cooking, it delivers both salinity and smoke in a single ingredient, adding complexity to foods. Roasted vegetables, grilled meat, chocolate, caramel, that benefit from smoky depth without the logistics of actual smoking. Quality varies considerably between commercial producers. Best smoked salts use genuine cold smoking over real wood with no artificial smoke flavoring added. Cheaper versions are sprayed with liquid smoke concentrate, which produces a harsher, less nuanced result. Difference is detectable immediately on the palate.